Infrastructure, accessibility, great reviews, your own gym, spacious, and so on and so forth. A hotel property?
Important for investors is the liquidity of their property.
They lowered the price by 20 to 30%. They sold everything.
No, that's the developer who builds, and there aren't many managers here either.
How do you even deal with this Balinese construction mafia? We couldn't find anything better than to lead this mafia ourselves.
All of this affects ROI.
Bang, bang. The two competitors are down. And then the brand strengthens the brand.
You're talking a couple million, 3 there.
Dollars? I think for sure not less.
We're the only service that knows this data.
Not bad?
Hello everyone. Today our guest is one of the most interesting players in the Bali real estate market, Anton Taranenko.
Hi.
Hi. Finally, please tell us, who are you? Anton Taranenko and Anta Group?
Anton Taranenko is first and foremost a businessman, an entrepreneur, and probably secondly a developer. Explain. Well, business and entrepreneurship came before development, and this isn't my first business, but probably one of my first large systematic offline businesses that are part of the Anta Group company orbit. Anta Group is a group of companies, and one of its areas is development, specifically development. Today, probably, in view of recent events in the world, it occupies one of the key, both economically from the point of view of investments as companies, and in general, probably the focus of my time and the company. The company is the Developer Group, which has been building for more than 5 years in the markets of Ukraine, Turkey, and Indonesia.
In Indonesia? You are now only in Bali project?
Only the project in Bali, but we have invested in land and bought land on other islands as well. And I think this year we will have announcements of other projects on other islands.
Okay, and how do you manage to keep the business in Ukraine and Turkey? Indonesia plus various other islands, so that's a huge spread, a real shift in focus. I know that you personally oversee the process. It's not like you're just a passive investor. Yes, so you actually participate operationally, you're constantly flying around. How do you manage that? How do you keep all 3 countries under control?
Well, in Ukraine, our investments are mostly on hold right now. We haven't been building since 2022. Currently, we have land plots in the western part of Ukraine. But this year, I actually plan to go for a site inspection to figure out exactly what we're going to build there, because I can feel the market coming back to life, with interest awakening not only from domestic but also foreign investors. And I think in 2026 we'll be making some announcements regarding Ukraine. So, the focus. Right now the focus is more on other projects besides real estate. We also have IT and fintech, but I think that's not what we'll be talking about today. Teams, that's the most important thing. Our main office is in Turkey, where I spend most of my time. Antalya? Yes, in the city of Antalya. There, we also build mainly clubhouses ranging from 3,500 to 5,000 square meters, relatively small, not far from the sea, in the old town. And in Bali, we have a large office, probably the biggest office among all our branches. Both the technical department and the internal client service have 20 people. There are probably also teams, including the contractor's internal service, which we recently created, of about 80 people. The foundation is poured there, but also concrete work.
All Ukrainians are not Linda on Zeus?
Indonesia. Probably 90%, yes.
This is management.
Not top management, probably. It's 70 to 30, 70% from the post-Soviet space. The core is Ukrainian, but there are also some Belarusians, some Kazakhs, for example, a few people. If we take, say, the procurement department, we even have top managers from Indonesia.
Let's talk about Bali. So the structure is, you have 2 combines, 2 projects in Bali, both in Canggu, a large hotel and another large hotel. Not on Panda, no.
That's absolutely right.
I know you've already started the preparatory work. At what stage is Panda at right now? Where are you in the process?
Panda is currently at the stage of completing the earthworks. I don't know the exact number, but tons have been moved. Well, actually not even moved, but stockpiled. Because it's valuable material that will later be used for construction, among other things. There's a lot of fertile soil. As it turns out, the soil on the cliff is really rich. And actually, we're even thinking that it will come in handy for us, including for landscaping in Canggu. For the block with 96 apartments. And just imagine...
1.5 hectares are already completely ready for the foundation. You said it took 3 months?
Yes, basically 3 months. We started at the end. We started in December. And so accordingly, we began the preparatory work in December. The fence was done in January, then February, March, April.
Is 1.5 hectares considered a big project?
It's a big project. That's 170 units, if I'm not mistaken. About 95 rooms and around 70 villas.
In Bali? 3 years ago, there were very few developers who built such projects. Now there are many, including both reliable and unreliable ones. Even those who were small have now grown in terms of sales volume at the very least and have started building large projects. But construction, especially of large infrastructure complexes, is a very complicated matter in Bali. It's one thing to build 40 apartments, a small house,
Or some villas, right?
or standard villas, yes? Hotels are a completely different story. I wanted to talk with you basically about the market as a whole, about construction, not from the sales perspective, but specifically from the product side. We both know very well how Balinese people work, how Indonesia in general operates, and what kind of difficulties there are, from bureaucracy to paperwork, all the way to construction contracts. How are you planning to handle such large projects? To build them on time? Yesterday we had a great conversation.
Right.
You said that a delay could be up to 6 months, but not more. How are you planning to build such a large hotel in just 2 or 2.5 years?
Look, what's the main feature of Bali? When we entered the market there, we focused on two indicators. The first was what our engineers were saying, and the second was what the marketing team was saying. So, the engineers said that a project of this scale at 10,000 square meters, under those conditions, it would take 3 years to build. Marketing said that if you launch a project of this scale and set a 3-year timeline, no one will buy anything from you.
That's confirmed.
Because on average, ROI is calculated over 2 years, and at that time, our competition was among teams building something similar. Is that right? As you said, there aren't that many developers building at this level, roughly within 2 years. And we basically bought into the marketing story, but at the same time, we really should have listened to the engineering management. And we ran into the simple issue that Bali wasn't quite ready for a project of this scale, infrastructure projects within such a time frame. Is that right? You asked the right question, that there are a lot of them. Now, there are a lot of significant projects emerging, but unfortunately, the teams working on them don't always match the level required for the project, the management that's handling it. We ourselves got burned and lost some time just trying to figure out how to deal with this Balinese construction mafia. In the end, we couldn't find a better solution than to take charge of this mafia ourselves. Now, when I
am now in a construction company.
Yes, I'm saying that our company employs 100 people. I mean that in the client service department, there are 2 people, that's the management, and then we have about 80 more people. That's our in-house subcontractor company. And then there's another company in the group and another company that was created by its own chief engineer. In fact, out of sheer necessity, we had several contractors. You know that we have a challenging infrastructure project in Canggu. There was a large parking lot, 11 meters deep, 1,500 meters in total area, just in length. 4-meter high ceilings with the ability for bus trucks and so on to drive in. And that was a challenge for us. And the biggest challenge was that in Bali, no one knew how to build this. When we were installing the board piles, 560 piles, can you imagine? We drove them in. That was quite a challenge too. We changed several contractors, and in the end, our management had to teach them how to do it. Then we changed contractors for the monolith work. Thank God these were just some initial non-critical standards, and we didn't give anyone a second chance. We just let them go right away. We even have this reputation among developers. That Anta Group is known as a pretty tough company when it comes to dealing with contractors. But I always say, guys, look, if a contractor made it to the end with Anta Group and got paid in full, you can hire them for any job.
They're real stars for quality.
Yes, that's absolutely right. We take this very seriously. If you ask me what's more important, deadlines or quality, of course I'll say quality.
But for the investor, besides quality, which goes without saying,
I agree with you, but here's the thing. There is a legal contract and there are forms that specify the construction deadlines. And developers always allow for 6 to 9 months, depending on the form and standards, to cover any force majeure situations. Today we understand that with each passing month, the Bali market is becoming clearer to us. In addition to the in-house contracting service, today Anta Group has a fully internal supply system. The concrete was of poor quality. So, on the island, they bought 2 concrete plants. At Pandawa, everything will be completely autonomous. The only thing we don't produce ourselves is rebar, but we order 12-meter long large pieces, not the cut ones. Unlike most developers, we have it delivered to us on long vehicles. So accordingly, based on this, we're saying that, yes, maybe sometimes we'll take longer, but we'll do our best to meet the contract deadlines. So for the investor to understand, when they sign the contract for the transfer, they see that there is a certain period that the developer can use without facing severe penalties. But on the other hand, let's ask, or rather, let me tell you about what we've done extra, things the investor doesn't pay for.
yes, tell me.
This also adds to its additional value. First of all, we completely changed our approach to construction materials. In addition to using higher quality materials from the start, for example, concrete walls, we don't use white cinder blocks, which are extremely noisy and so on. We use special panels cast at a specialized factory. And this also gives us a certain advantage. All the electrical conduits are also built into these panels. so there's no need to chase or drill into the walls, no need for complicated repairs later on, and so forth. Next, we didn't settle for some kind of straw or bamboo roof. We ordered a special roof. You know, in our project, it has a wave shape, which is quite complex. It's an architectural element. We specifically order it from China, ship it, clear it through customs. Everything is done officially and transparently. So this is also a visual element for people to consider when making their choice. We completely changed the interior design. We moved away from wet processes and painting systems. Because when we were building the showroom, we were honestly shocked by how contractors, let's say, handle interior renovations, from painting the walls to laying the tiles. We switched to materials that are more aesthetically pleasing to us, like decorative panels. They can be made of wood or ecoplastic, but either way, these are beautiful, high-quality options. We added a lot of features that weren't there before. From an infrastructure standpoint, we raised the level and so on. For example, rooftop air conditioning. Who else has rooftop air conditioning? No one? And it's not just some air conditioner units. It's a full-fledged system, like the Mitsubishi ones in airports. I'm going to have 9 air conditioners installed.
Is your rooftop open?
Our rooftop is open, but still, according to the design, it should be open in the areas where events will be held. The concept of Canggu is precisely to have this as a central spot for hosting events. Because one of the goals of this hotel is MICE tourism, that is, meetings, incentives, and events. That's what we're going to use to attract people. That's where we'll be gathering groups. I think we'll talk more about this, how we plan to fill the hotel. So, in order to make this possible, we needed a large conference hall, and our conference hall is on the top floor of the 3rd block, 500 square meters, seating for 300 people. We increased the size of the windows. We have large windows. At certain points, they reach up to 2 meters high. Then the roof slopes down lower. Next, we add awnings, and with the press of a single button, I can make it completely blackout. This way you can shield yourself not only from the rain but also from the sun. And there's air conditioning, and the air conditioning is professional-grade Mitsubishi units. Not just wall units, but large industrial air conditioners like the ones you see in airports for indoor spaces. I think this will be the first rooftop in Canggu like this, where you can sit and hold events. We'll have a restaurant there and so on. In the 1st block, we have a pool with a panoramic view. In the 2nd block, a restaurant. And in the 3rd block, an event hall. There are 3 elevators. Originally, the project had 2 elevators. And these aren't just any elevators, so it's a pretty serious setup as well. Well, basically, there's almost nothing local there except for the stone and some really important things, you know. Everything else is mostly imported, brought in from abroad. Again, there's a lot, you know, of hotels that install sprinkler systems for fire safety. That's an automatic fire extinguishing system. Well, excuse me, but that costs $200,000. Probably not. And so, step by step. Plus, to speed up the process, we bought a plot of land next to ours for the crane, where our crane is now. We bought it outright. We bought it directly. There, yes, we have 5 heirs, and later we'll build 3 villas there that will be connected to the complex. The lucky owners of these 2 villas, one of them. I want to keep one for myself. It will be... And
Did you buy that plot of land in order to comply with the regulations? Because you have a building covering the entire plot? Did you buy it? To attach it to your plot and meet the building footprint requirements?
listen, we did buy it. Primarily, our goal was to speed up the project from an infrastructure standpoint to set up a crane. But later on, we'll allocate the necessary square meters, if at some point we don't have enough, including to this plot. But to be specific, for our plot, the number of residential square meters we're using is within the regulations. The only place where we might have some deviations is the roof level. But there is a system of certain contributions, so-called in Bali, which you can pay for. This is a legal operation. Please don't confuse it with a building permit. It's a completely legal function and so on. You're simply paying for the use of the roof. For example, in some European cases. But otherwise, this project is probably one of the few, I think you know this too, that received its PBG back in 2023. And this
PBG, and for such a complex large-scale infrastructure project too? With
parking and everything.
how many square meters do you have?
If we're talking about the total area, it's about 10,000. We shouldn't forget that most of that square footage, almost 6,000, is included. That includes the parking, which technically isn't counted
Does that go underground?
on the property. Yes, they're included in the square meters, about 1,500 meters. Then there are the common areas, which are about another 2,500 meters, and a small commercial section, about 700 meters.
All right, let's take a step back. We've touched a bit on the paperwork. There's a myth in Bali, we recently discussed this with Vernick, also on a podcast, that some people, yes, there's this phrase, I'm going by PBG, or I'm going by SLF. And people get a bit They confuse these models. It's not possible to just go by.
PBG.
In any case, you have to get a building permit, and then after that, you get the occupancy permit. But with SLF, if you get the PBG, you pretty much get it automatically.
No deviations in the PBG.
Yes, absolutely. You have to build it the way you're supposed to.
Exactly right.
A lot of people built without a PBG. This practice exists around the world. You just build,
And then a lot of people did it this way.
and they will keep building like that for some time. So, I want to ask you, was it possible to just go ahead, start building, and then negotiate afterwards? And by the way, it's not always about bribes. Sometimes you just need to build the project properly, go through the procedure, and get the SLF. Why did you decide to go with the PBG from the very beginning?
Because I don't want to get shut down during construction and be told that I owe something. Because in any jurisdiction, especially if it's a new one for me, I work strictly according to the law. Because I have, and I'm not afraid to say it, influential friends both in Turkey and in Bali who, first and foremost, would give me a hard time if I didn't follow the law. First and foremost, it would be disrespectful to them. Yes, they can advise me and help me out in some situations, but they will only help me within the legal framework. Because taking advantage of, as you say, administrative resources, I do everything strictly by the law so that to use, the excesses of this whole thing. And also because I don't believe in the story where people say, don't worry about it. They say, we'll sort everything out. But as a rule, you end up being very vulnerable. And you and I both know that. There was one case which followed a similar pattern that really picked up momentum at the point when it was already running with a serious overload. It was very easy to bring it down because it had no safety zones or forms of protection for its business.
Is that experience from your past, or do you generally?
I'm actually a proponent of doing things legally. I believe that wherever you are, you should do things properly, plus our experience in Turkey, since we actually started building there a bit earlier than in Bali. It made it clear that if you're in Turkey, a foreigner is called a bangi, and that's not an insult, it's a specific term.
It's just a designation? Yes, there are already.
Anji, yes. And in this case, in Bali, it's bule. So you need to understand that you'll be facing a double situation, because if you don't stand up for yourself, and accordingly in our business, stand up for the interests of investors, then at any moment you could be pushed out. And they'll clean up after you. And all those millions or billions that you raised to create some kind of successful stories. So I sleep much more peacefully. I know that no one will come after me, and I won't get shut down. I don't have any anxious dreams, and I don't get nervous when in the form of some inspections or anything like that, because everyone gets inspected and checked, but it's done openly and transparently. And we promote this approach. And I have the money, most importantly, to get this PBG done up to the point needed. It's not a cheap process. For Canggu, we paid, if I'm not mistaken, $100,000 to $150,000, and for Pandawa, almost 300, something like that. And these are all official payments under official contracts to consultants who have some kind of price list. I know that many people don't pay that kind of money at all. 30 to 20,000.
Some people only have 200,000 in total for the whole project, their own money. Okay, got it. You said you have your own construction financing, or is it just for this one? What's your financing structure?
The structure of our business is as follows. 30 to 40% of all project budgets, as a rule, are the company's own money or the money of the company's partners. So let's call it conditionally old money, so to speak. It's either our co-development or our partners in the company. I am the main partner in the company. I also have sub-partners for different projects. The company structure is such that in one project I might have 2 partners, while in another project I might go in completely alone. As a sole investor, and in some cases there might be 3 of us. Accordingly, this is the company's money. With the company's money, we usually buy the land plot, we typically finance most of the team, and we generally handle the architectural project AR, KR. In short, everything related to the working documentation. And as a rule, we invest at the stage of obtaining permits.
When construction sales begin.
Next, when construction begins, for the initial stages, usually for the monolithic works, we invest most of our own money because these are relatively small investments compared to everything else. About 60 to 70%, depending on the project, comes from funds raised from investors. Either these are mono investors.
Do you mean unit sales, or are there also investor partners?
Well, look, partners, investors. If it's a mono investor, we still count it as selling square meters. It's just that one person comes in and buys, say, for $5 million, for example. That counts as a transaction.
You just allocate those square meters to him at a certain price.
We come to an agreement with him, sign a contract, and depending on the model, he receives a guarantee of his return. Either it's an investment or simply square meters at a set price, or later we just sell them together with him.
You sell and split it.
The income depends on his entry point. For example, if his entry price was $3,000 per square meter, then during the construction phase it became $3,500, and when we go to open sales it's $4,000. So accordingly, he can earn up to 30%.
But he has to sell it himself. You don't help him? No.
He doesn't sell anything at all.
You handle everything yourself. I do.
Or with partners, for example, people like you. I mean,
your team brings in everyone necessary to make it happen for him.
absolutely right. He doesn't even think about, say, what to do with those square meters. He puts in the money, comes in as a sole investor, gets his square meters as a sole investor. He exits if he wants to exit either fully or partially from his investment at the stage when the entire complex is being sold. And depending on our agreement on how much he conditionally needs the money in the investment, he gets his return with added value
But you lock in the price, basically, that you agreed on.
at the price we agreed on. But for me, it's not, honestly, I'm not about big discounts. I'm generally not about undercutting the market, and in general,
But this isn't a sale. It's still about bringing in a financial partner.
that's absolutely right. But I still evaluate it as if, look, I evaluate everything in terms of the cost of money. If, for example, the fund costs me 7% per year, the fund's day, if we're talking about, that's
Good.
yes, institutional investors. So, for example, they come in and say, we offer 7% per year, guaranteed, no problem. But in 3 years, we have to exit. So, in total, it comes out to 21% project money for me, and then someone comes to me, a mono investor.
But the responsibility is on you.
Accordingly, yes, if I take 5 million from them, I return 5 million to them. But there is a collateral component. I have a lot of land in freehold purchased and so on. I can provide them with some form of security, not just my contract or a promissory note.
But if you bring in an investor, they're still risking their money, right? So they gave you the money.
It depends on the model. They might be risking their money for square meters. Or if it's an investor who, for example, is with us for the first stage, we can offer them freehold land as collateral, if of course they're interested in it. But as a rule, we try
To work with investors. What about for the fund? They gave you the money, got 7%, but you're responsible for the principal. You have to pay it back.
you have to return the money with the yield plus 7% per year.
But when you bring in a financial partner, for example, here's a common story. You team up with a partner, a developer, start building, and then it doesn't sell. Only 3 out of 73 units are sold. Still, the financial responsibility remains. The responsibility for these unsold units falls on the investor, the partner.
That's not right. The one who should bear responsibility is the designated partner who is in charge of sales. If in your arrangement the developer is responsible for sales, then it's essentially their responsibility, and they should make sure that the partner is able to sell those units. If from the very beginning you agreed that he doesn't bear responsibility and the second mono investor does whatever he wants with that money. And
What about you? For example, we're the investor, we're coming in with 5 million for you.
it depends on what we agreed on. If you want to get more money, then accordingly your guarantee is less. But if you want more guarantees, then accordingly your return is lower.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? For example, an institution, they take 7%, but at the same time you have everything.
Guaranteed.
That's basically like a loan or credit. You could say that, yes. But a financial partner still wants a higher margin. At the same time, they understand that if, for example, the market changes, there's a crisis, or something isn't selling, after all, they're freezing their money. They're stuck, yes.
For example, when COVID started, we were stuck with construction for 3 years or 2 or a year.
And they're responsible for that.
They were just as stuck as we were.
How often do you have cases where you can't find an investor? Or do you generally have no issues with financing, with construction?
I'll put it this way. At the moment, Anta Group has no problems attracting investments for any of its projects. But let me put it this way. I understand perfectly well what the market is and how it works. Overall, we take a very, let's say, cautious approach to expansion. I think you can see that, right? We are launching projects, but it's our second project, not our 5th or 10th like some others, right? Because we're all about focus, not spreading ourselves too thin. And right now, we're more likely to reinvest our own money to become stronger and more independent. For example, buying equipment. I know some developers after the 2024 season bought themselves cars and all sorts of other things. Someone even bought a helicopter together with 2 others and so on. And what did Anton Taranenko and the company Anta Group buy? 2 excavators, 2 concrete plants, and 1 crane truck. Like, damn, I also spent $1 million. But excuse me, I spent it on things I actually need. First of all, they're going to save me money on the cost per square meter, on concrete and so on.
Are you going to keep those savings for yourself, or do you Or do you end up spreading it out over the price and your price goes down? Do you base your pricing on cost or on margin? What is your...
I base it on cost price. I can't make a product cheaper than it costs me. At the same time, I initially set a much higher cost price than the average developer in Bali. First of all, I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely sure, this is the honest truth, how much the final project will actually cost me. Let me remind you, this is my first project in Bali. And I haven't gone through all the stages yet. Right now, I'm at the MEP and interior finishing stage. When I finish everything completely and hand the project over to the hotel operator, then I'll be able to understand and calculate the total cost. Yes, I have all the cash flow, profitability, P&L, everything is tracked with daily reports. But right now I understand that this is what I'm counting on. And my margin is set at around 20% of the total project cost.
your profitability?
Yes, the project's margin for me for developers, it's 20% of the total project cost. And that's good.
That's very good.
Yes. I don't know how people claim 50%, 70% margins. I honestly can't even imagine how that's possible, especially in Bali.
They build with really poor materials but skilled hands.
Maybe. But listen, I have some too. On Instagram, there are also horror videos of construction in Bali. It's just insane. And the scariest thing is when people who buy these units only look at the renderings and at the final product. But they forget the most important thing, how their unit was actually built. You know, not many projects have online cameras set up and displayed on the website.
Not many, but there are some. There are some, yes.
Yes, displayed on the website, not through some app, somewhere, wherever, but on the website, streamed online 24/7 and so on, not hiding anything where you can just watch. Our investors always write like, oh great, you built half a floor in a week, and they're happy about it. And at the same time, people would write, come on guys, why is it so hard? Everything is so complicated with you. We still can't see you. You're still working underground, right? Because the parking was complicated, yes, and so on. I think this trustworthiness and the general understanding that if you have some kind of issue, you talk to the investor about it, that's the most important thing.
Okay, let's get back to the financial models. You're not cheap, your products aren't cheap, you sell at good prices, but at the same time you build with quality. Everything is in order with your documents and so on. Well, it's a well-known fact that we take a long time to vet developers and projects before we start working with them. Sometimes it can take excessively long, but often it's justified. And we're still just getting to know you. Yes, we've already passed on Canggu. Now we're discussing Pandawa, and we're already at the final stage. We like what we see in your projects and your approach. We like the founder, who is strong and decisive, who personally keeps everything under control. In order to truly accept a partner, a potential partner, you need to go through a certain process to see how they operate, how they work in the market. So what I see with Antti, I really like. But there are a few questions which, from an investor's perspective, put their ROI in doubt. Because the main goal of an investor is profitability. Besides profitability, preservation is also important. So we've just addressed the issue of preservation. Basically, we've discussed a lot. It's clear. Documents, land, construction quality, that you haven't jumped into a niche. Yesterday you were selling cars, today you're a developer, tomorrow you're off to the Maldives because that's where the market is headed. In terms of the safety and preservation of investments, you guys are okay. The question of profitability, this is the second important question for an investor. And even if your investor is going to get a good ROI in Bali, that's 12 to 14% real returns. That's a very good ROI if you honestly calculate all the expenses and so on. But if they're going to get 12 to 14% after a year and a half from when they entered the project, that's one thing. After 3 years, that's another. And after 3.5 years, that's even more. It's so hard to build in Bali. Not just for you, but for everyone in general. In Bali, there are major issues with personnel, quality, materials, atmosphere, and so on. There are holidays, ceremonies, and so on. But you also have a huge infrastructure complex. It's 1.5 hectares. That's a very large complex. Yes, you move quickly, you have your own techniques there. That's a good factor in your favor, but there's also a downside. It's a big construction project. A big construction project always means uncontrollable deadlines. So what you said at the beginning, the marketers advise to speed things up a lot, then you realize that in the end, we'll go over the deadlines, but that's just how it is. Going over the deadlines can happen 2 or 3 times. There are cases on the market where a developer postponed the deadlines 5 times. By the way, in terms of quality, it's actually phenomenal, really cool. Everything is great, very valuable, a competent developer, but they postponed the deadlines 5 times. And the investor, in the end, if you take emotions out of it, of course, safety is a given, but there's also ROI to consider. Please tell me about the deadlines and about your responsibility. What's in the contracts and how do you generally see things working on the Bali market? What deadlines or delays do you expect?
So if we separate the two projects, let's say Canggu and Pandawa, let's start with Pandawa. For Pandawa, I don't see any delays because there are already established.
What deadline you set?
Set the end of 26, but we have the option to take an additional 2 quarters, so that would be the second quarter of 27. And
What does it mean if you can
take it. According to our contract, it's 24 months plus 6.
24 months for construction plus 6 for delays
No, plus 6 for delays, yes.
without penalties?
Without penalties. I always calculate it so that we have 30 months. And for investors who buy an apartment, a unit, or a villa from us, we tell them to plan for a 30-month time frame because there may be unforeseen circumstances that could cause delays in the construction process. So, when it comes to ROI and any calculations, keep in mind that there could be a 6-month delay in the completion of the project.
Yeah, okay. But for an investor, that's not very appealing.
Look, why isn't it appealing? In this case,
2.5 years?
2.5 years. Look, you said everything correctly. And at the beginning, you said it well, that we're just looking around. But let's start with how and why our communication began in the first place. You were comparing and, so to speak, reconciling two properties. A typical apartment somewhere in Canggu and a hotel complex. If you also compare, say, under management, even if it's Ukrainian for
Today, right now,
but a brand, yes. If we're talking, for example, about Pandawa, there it's actually Ramada Encore, which is a huge holding and a very well-known brand. In fact, they have about 960 Ramada hotels worldwide. And by the way, most of them are in Asia. So comparing them is just as pointless as comparing two types of cars. For example, a Skoda and a Mercedes, both can be S-Class, for instance, business class. Both can have a certain size format and might even be located on roughly the same street. But the quality of the experience you get, the feeling of driving a Mercedes, whether you're behind the wheel or in the back seat, and a Skoda is fundamentally different.
there's really no question about it.
And here, answering your question,
It's a question of timing.
timing, yes. If we're talking about timing, then in this case, I believe that if we're talking about a half-year period during which, theoretically, an investor might not receive their expected returns, there's always a story behind it. For example, for investors who have found themselves or might find themselves in such a situation, so far we haven't had such a case, but we have this safeguard, we can extend their leasehold at our own expense. And
Is the land currently freehold?
no, it depends on which one. If we're talking about Pandawa, it's leasehold. They have 30 years. At whose expense? The developers. If, for example,
Build 2 years, that count?
let's say yes, that's included. But for example, let's say in Canggu, if we have some kind of delay there or somewhere else. On our side, we say, look, we were delayed, but you won't have to pay for the next year, of course. And accordingly, their financial model doesn't change at all. It doesn't change at all. They had 28 years in the financial model. They have 28 years. And if someone says, well, then it turns out it's not 50, but 40. Or 48 or 49, it turns out. Here, I'll also say, guys, Indonesian law states the following. After 50 years, you can extend for another 50 years. This so-called leasehold. And the likelihood of it being extended depends on two factors. First, it depends on the developer's own desire to stay in this project, rather than, doing what I did. When I once invested in the infamous Wojciechowski construction projects, and then had to form cooperatives and finish building my own house on Jacquet Street. Naukova Street in Kyiv. Accordingly, or not getting involved in an IT cooperative with a developer if the developer is someone like Anton Taranenko. And the company, the group, sees its interest in earning returns from the square meters and doesn't sell everything off completely. Instead, it itself is the founder of the commercial space.
How many square meters do you have in each one?
Well, there will be a lot in Pandawa because I'm keeping the villas there for rental and so on. If we're talking about Canggu, all the commercial space, the company, the group, all the commercial space is only 1,000 square meters, just to remind you. Altogether there, if you include the parking, it's up to 10, if you count just the residential part. 4 plus another 1,000 to 1,500 square meters of commercial space. The commercial operations will be carried out. So,
You're holding about 2 or 3 million of your own there.
is that right? In dollars, I think, definitely not less. Accordingly, I am more interested than anyone else in making sure my term does not get extended. And my children, who are now 8 and 5 years old, are even more interested in receiving passive income. So, I don't see a problem here. The other question is whether the developer provides such a tool or not. In our case, it's specified in the contract. The second point, of course, is that there are penalties, fines, and so on. But to be honest, the developer is just as unwilling to lose their money as the investor is by paying out, so to speak.
It's not even about intentionally wanting to get in. It's a matter of market factors.
I agree, it can happen. Right now, I'm talking about what safeguards exist for investors. First, on the developer's side, it could be an extension of the lease term at the developer's expense, so in this case, the investor doesn't lose out. Second, there could be a revision, for example, a deferral of payments, which in turn postpones the payment amount. At the construction stage, it's actually tied to the stages of construction. That's how it works for us at Pandawa. And third, there could be an option, for example, where the penalty in this case is simply a payout, meaning the investor just receives the money. But that's probably due.
Have these penalties limited by a certain period?
They are limited by a period, if I'm not mistaken, up to 6 months or up to 12 or 0.5 or 1% per month, something like that.
On the transaction amount?
On the transaction amount, of course, yes, on the transaction amount. But we are actually very flexible. Listen, with Canggu, we have investors who say, listen, can I not pay right now, at least until you finish the monolith, just so I can feel at ease?
At ease.
Yes, I say, yes, of course, that's possible. But then they ask, do you have the money? I say, don't worry, we have the money. We'll show you how we've reached a certain
stage. But is your funding 40% your own or from partners? Well, attracted, yes. In
your company? Yes, mostly from partners.
But 60% is still installments from your
investors? Those are investors, yes, who are being bought in. Let's call them ancient investors, right?
Well, those are the end clients.
Not clients, no. End clients are guests, but these are regular retail investors.
Retail investors, okay, got it. Tomorrow, let's say not a force majeure, we're not talking about some kind of disaster, just regular market circumstances, a crisis. A crisis is not a force majeure. A crisis is just a market circumstance and so on. So investors, retail investors say, there's nothing to pay with, we won't pay. How would you continue building the complex? Would you do it, or what would your scenario be, your personal safety mechanism in such situations? Because being in debt to retail investors is a risk. Now for you.
Yes, let me explain. It depends on which project we're talking about. About Pandawa. Who is Pandawa to us? Probably about Pandawa, because with Canggu we don't have any risk. We've already sold 85%. And even if for some reason those remaining 15% say, for some reason we can't make payments for now, we'll still build and finish the project with the money we have now, including investing some of our own funds, and we'll deliver the property. And then, if a person can't pay, we'll simply, according to the contract, give them an opportunity. If they don't use it, we'll just resell it to someone who can pay.
So what's the catch? My job as an agent, as a broker, is precisely to work through all the scenarios that aren't part of the usual ones. Tomorrow, investors might not sell. Tomorrow, the market situation could be, for example, they found
a volcano
erupts. A volcano, it can't because it doesn't have the pressure. Or, for example, a plague.
Or perhaps another wave of COVID, for example, for instance.
And people aren't buying. So even if you repossess someone's unit as a penalty, he can't anymore.
Pay. He can't sell it.
Yeah, meaning he won't be able to sell it. And then you have the issue of financing the construction. We're not considering COVID, as COVID is force majeure. Let's take an example.
I understand. Okay, got it. If we take, for example, a market that's in a certain stagnation, there's a downturn, let's say, or just some kind of volatility, something unclear. We will build only as much as our internal resources allow. But I don't rule out the possibility that the construction pace might slow down. Let me explain why. We have a certain stage. At this stage, we have our own funds and funds from attracted clients. Let's take Pandawa as an example. For Pandawa, for instance, we've currently attracted 30% of the funds from retail investors. And 30% is ours, so a total of 60%. But
30% from retail is in installments. It's not all cash up front.
No, you mean they haven't paid 100%. Then maybe it's a bit more, but the actual money, yes, I agree with you, you're right. So it's
just cash flow, not P&L, but cash flow. Yes.
Basically, at the moment, we only have about 30% there.
Cash, which?
Yes, our own money. And that's enough for us to, for example, build the monolith, close some processes related to communications, and that's it. If, for some reason, difficulties arise, most likely we'll handle it this way. If the situation is completely deadlocked for the end investor, we'll talk to all the investors. If it's a matter of principle for them, we'll try to find the money if our own funds aren't enough.
To finance
Yes, to provide additional financing. If we realize that, for some reason, together with the investors, it's easier for us to wait it out, to weather this crisis, let's call it that, and then relaunch later, we'll do so. But we don't have any critical points, for example, in construction, where, let's say we haven't finished something, we've done the concrete frame, okay, it's winter, but the structure is already done. Because if we lay the utilities now, for some reason, we won't be able to control them. They'll just get stolen. Or something else might happen to them. So what's the point? Then maybe we'll just hit pause, wait for a decision because the situation could be such that it might be closed off. It's an island, after all.
Yes.
Logistics could be shut down. We might simply not be physically able to do the work that needs to be done at this stage, to build.
That makes sense. Force majeure in circumstances.
If the market just crashes and there's nothing, then probably we'll try to finish the construction ourselves. If at some point we run out of money, we'll be honest about it. And we'll say, guys, look, this is the situation. You're not paying, and on our end, we've brought it to this stage. For example, we already don't have enough of our own funds, so we have two options. Option one, we attract funding, but for example, that will cost us extra money, and we tell them, whether it's a bank loan, credit, doesn't matter, from an institutional investor, some kind of fund, they'll also need something in return. Either we provide it ourselves or we reduce the investor's yield, right? Well, at the expense of something. Or we tell them, or let's just pause this story and start it when the opportunity arises. Here too, it's important to understand. If you invest in investment real estate, you're essentially buying a construction project.
Yes.
That's also important to understand. And if in this case you're not paying for this construction, then at some point the construction might come to an end. It could stop, of course. Yes, and here it's important to understand that it's good when the developer has their own money, but it doesn't matter what situation you're in. Country, location, Bali, Kiev, Warsaw, or, I don't know, Dubai. If the cash flow, the stream of money dries up from all sides, well, people still haven't learned to work for nothing. And as a rule, they're going to want something. So accordingly, it's very important here to set things up and build a financial model where you don't get caught out. And how can you do that? Don't take on too many projects, especially not a bunch of unfinished ones at the same time. Don't engage in cross-financing, where you fund one project with money from another.
That's a pyramid scheme.
And yes, don't fool yourself with illusions like, I'll just take some money from this project to buy myself a car, a helicopter, or something else. And then with the next project, I won't take any money and I'll use it to finish building the first one. I know a lot of stories like that. And usually it ends very badly because the money they took for their own needs is already spent. And the money they planned to use for the actual necessary things, like finishing construction, never came in for one reason or another.
Absolutely. And there could be a million reasons for that. We're not going to try to guess, like a fortune teller, what the price might be. There can be a huge number of them. My job, our job as agents, is precisely risk management. Because when an investor buys off plan, they take on risks. That is, they trust the developer, they trust the project, they trust the market, that everything will grow, everything will be safe, and so on. So my job is to minimize as much as possible the risks that the investor takes on, or about safety. That's why I ask all these questions. Let's move on to the topic of the market. So how has the market changed over the past 2 years? How do you see it now?
Well, I see that a good kind of segregation is starting, a cleansing, acceptance, and maximum utilization of something unnecessary. I'm not just talking about the approach right now, but probably about people in general as well. You mean
The players in the market?
exactly, and that's true on both sides. Because the developer and the broker are two components, and it's very important to have some kind of synergy in communication. Because the developer is supposed to set the tone for the market, but very often in uncontrolled markets, it's the brokers who set the tone. That's what happened in Turkey, unfortunately, when at some point commissions exceeded 10%. It's just insane. And this simply led to developers either reducing their profitability, thereby entering a risk zone where they might not finish construction just to compete for something, or raising the price per square meter so much that it simply became unappealing. So, if we're talking about what I see, I notice a certain trend. Developers who are unable to bring their projects to completion and deliver quality will be leaving the market. I already know of several prominent large developers who used to dominate. For example, in 2022, when we entered the market, they were number 2 in Chang and Birava, let's put it that way, without naming names. And just recently, I asked in a private conversation, and they told me we're finishing our last project in Bukit and moving to other, so to speak, jurisdictions. Not Indonesian at all. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. The point is, people are leaving. And it seems to me, at least from my perspective, that these are relatively big players who are leaving. Why? Well, probably because
The marketing is overblown.
I also think the approach is changing. The way they used to do things, because the way they delivered projects in 2022 to 2023 is no longer interesting to investors in 2024 to 2025. They don't want to buy that anymore. And they realize that profitability is dropping. The promised 12 to 14% doesn't even reach 6 to 7% on apartments. And that's very unfortunate. And accordingly, because of this, the market is changing dramatically. And now I see that there will be a battle of concepts. A battle of some high-quality, good and priority-driven stories for investors. A battle of communities. A battle of, well, I think, sensible projects that have real substance inside. You mentioned Canggu earlier. I'll tell you again, for me, that's great. It's important to create a product that's holistic and has a lot of factors driving occupancy rather than just delivering it on time. If I have to make a choice between delivering the product on time but making it less attractive for the end consumer, for tourists, for business travelers, and so on, or spending an extra 6 months but increasing occupancy, adding some elements that will boost my occupancy, I will honestly communicate with the investors and say, guys, we've made this decision. I'm not going to consult with them. I'll tell them that this is the right thing to do because, it's like when you go to a doctor and he says, sorry, but you need to have this operation. Because you'll live longer and happier. Or you don't need the operation. You can live as you wish, but at some point you'll die 10 years earlier. And you're like, And people very often can't make a decision with you. So we're a company that can make a decision somewhere and take responsibility for it.
But here balance is important, right? I mean, not dragging it out for 5 to 10 years.
No. Wait, we're talking about a time frame, something like 9 months. That's a perfectly reasonable time frame. Look, if we take my experience in Ukraine again, either as a user or say in Dubai, I'll give you a quick example. Go ahead, Ukraine. No, Dubai. In 2024, I bought units and apartments from two well-known companies. The first is Emar. They're building Collective 2 in Dubai Hills. And in my contract, it says there's a 6-month grace period for delays. Maybe. Exactly at the time of project handover, I get a letter of happiness in my email. No one called me, no one talked to me, no one sent me a postcard. No congratulatory message, no one told me they improved or added something or asked if I wanted to postpone my payment. They just deliver this happiness, saying that according to such and such clause, number so and so, by such and such DAO, we inform you that we will delay construction for 3 months. Exactly 3 months later, I get a second letter of happiness, which says, according to such and such clause, we inform you that we will delay construction for another 3 months. But to be fair, after 6 months, they invited me to the soft opening, though they actually opened 4 months later. They said, look, everything's great after all. They just said, our pool isn't working yet, our gym isn't open yet, and the parking, you can't park your car there because it's not ready yet. And the fire safety inspection service hasn't come to us yet, so we're waiting. And here's our schedule. Yes, so you can't live here, you can't rent it out.
But we've built everything.
Yes, we've built it. What does the contract say? Complete the construction. There you go. This is Dubai, which is often compared as being high-tech, a super secure and highly diplomatic market. No one even talks there. And in Bali, when a broker like you calls their client 10 times and says, sorry, maybe tickets to Bali, maybe a hotel, or maybe they'll send you something else, congratulate your daughter on her birthday, your son, and so on. And it's, a completely different approach. Well, at least that's exactly how it works at Anta Group. And from our side, we understand that if a person, we have one exit. A person who found out, I don't want to wait another 3 months. His unit, which he bought for 120,000, was successfully sold in a week for 155.
Was that by your sales department? Yes. Or by an agent?
No, our agent, unfortunately, in this case, didn't even communicate at all.
That's important. That's great. But there should be a golden mean. We still calculate ROI over years. If you're going to earn ROI in 5 years, not everyone thinks in terms of 20 to 30 years. People often want to buy for 4 to 5 years, rent it out, and then cash out. Or at least have the option to cash out. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll sell, but the strategy isn't calculated for 30 years. The strategy is calculated for some tangible number of years. We're talking about the market here, the Bali market.
Honestly, I'll tell you as a developer, I don't really believe in the flipping market in Bali.
Isn't this flipping? Why flip?
Well, All right. In the market of reselling a property in Bali with a higher return than, for example, in other markets, still, I think Bali is a traditional rental income market. Well,
But you still need liquidity. Look, the most important principle in real estate and in real estate investing in general is liquidity. How can you turn your dollars into square meters and then, when you need to, not necessarily when you want to, but because of life circumstances or a million other reasons, you need to cash out right now? How you sell this property at break even or with a profit, that's a separate question. Because rental income over 5 years is already quite good. Even if it's just 12% per year, that's 60% over 5 years. And with indexation, there's still some indexation. It's not super high, but it's there. Well, yes.
capitalization, some even more.
So you'll definitely sell it for more because simple indexation and inflation will boost it, the value of the property. These properties are a sure thing, 100%. If you have high quality ones in 5 years, they'll still be standing strong and in good condition. But you made money from rent, got 60% plus indexation, so 70%, and even sold it for 10 to 15% more. Why? Because if you have a leasehold, and most of them are leaseholds, then after 5 years, when you sell, you'll have not 30 years left, but 25. So you have the capitalization of the property, but you also have a discount due to the reduction of the leasehold. Let's say things get settled, so you won't have a big... I agree with you that the issue of making money on resale in Bali is less relevant, simply because you have this discounting factor. The rates are affected by the leasehold, but these rental payments received over 5 years, plus a small margin on resale, well, often it's actually large simply because the market is booming. But let's say conservatively, it won't be that big. It's still a good profit. But the most important thing for an investor is the liquidity of their property. It's about how they can sell it.
Exactly right. And here's where I'll answer your question. I am deeply convinced that the projects Anta Group is developing today are more liquid than all the projects our neighbors are doing, within a radius of 1 or 2
kilometers. Why?
Let me explain. First and foremost, it's about the concept and about who will be managing our properties. I believe that when you buy a unit from a hotel operator company, specifically a hotel operator, which is very important, one that owns dozens or even hundreds of hotels and knows how to generate returns, it's like buying a share in an already operating business with proven profitability. This is especially true if we're talking about reselling in 3 to 5 years, when there's growth, PR, and so on, and when professional teams are handling it. If you look at the history of exiting investments, for example, Take, for example, hotels in Dubai or Spain, where this practice also exists. Believe me, Radisson, Ramada, Hilton, Hyatt, and so on are much more valuable than apartments managed by no-name or local name companies or by some guys who think they can manage well, adding their own 10% margin into the management story. It's a black box, an unknown story for investors. That's why our company, this group, never gets involved in projects where we have more than one area of responsibility, even commercial properties
that we're talking about.
We won't manage a restaurant, I won't manage a beauty salon, I won't manage a kids club, and so on. For every venture, I have a strong partner who has international experience, expertise, and who will strengthen my project. And even better, in Canggu, we have this concept. The rooftop restaurant should be autonomous. For example, Intercontinental in Kyiv, right?
Yes.
Behash, do you remember the bar upstairs?
Yes.
What is it known as? Let's go to Bihush. And where is it located? In the Intercontinental. They went to the Intercontinental, which has Behush. That's exactly how it will be. On the first floor, our cafe will also be with a certain well-known Balinese brand that people recognize. And these should be prime locations. And then the brand reinforces the brand. And believe me, I think that in Canggu, the unit, after opening and in a year or two, will be worth over $200,000. Because it should generate... You and I will definitely argue about this. It won't
be worth 200. It'll be worth a good amount.
I think that on resale, it could definitely be worth that kind of money because the yield it should, in theory, generate for the second investor who buys it on the secondary market, they'll still have the opportunity over those 40, let's say, 5 years. Let's say if we spend 2 or 3 years building plus another 2 to 3 years, he still rents it out and then passes on the check. Over those 4 to 5 years, he should have the opportunity to earn, well, at least if not 5, then definitely 4.5 times his investment. So a solid 4.5 times.
But that's not how people think. No one thinks in terms of decades. That's a good thing. In the financial model, it looks nice and fits well. By the way, even in the financial model we put together with all the arguments and justifications, it takes up about 50 pages. And that's with different scenarios. Stress deals, for example, if someone comes in for 5 years and has a target, we still calculate different scenarios for them a year in advance. This is very important because making your own plans is good, but you need to understand your exit points. 50 pages, more than 50 pages. Our financial models include indexation and amortization. We always have an amortization fund, which is calculated not from your hotel fund, but specifically from my unit. Renovation is planned every 5 years. We calculate this conservatively. And accordingly, if we cut everything out, the ROI becomes, even when we compare ourselves to our competitors, other agents who make the same financial models, they simply don't account for all these payments. For example, we include annual indexation of the value of the land property. That is, every year I have an amount that is allocated. The leasehold amount is calculated over 30 years and the value of this leasehold for the year. And accordingly, you don't actually pay it every year, of course, but you still deduct it because essentially this is the discounting of that future value. In order to sell, you need to compensate for it. So in that case, the financial models don't look as attractive as those of our colleagues. There, 17 to 18%. Yes, that's real. But at what entry cost? If you enter a project as a financial partner and, as you said, buy a unit at a discount, of course your entry point is simply cheaper.
Hold on, then let's do the same. That's on the invested money, but it doesn't always reflect the value of the entire project. You have
17 to 18%. I don't need all.
project, but what if we're talking specifically about a unit? 10, 12, 14% at best before taxes. That's a good
Story. Before taxes, that's important.
before taxes, yes. From a specific investor, yes, if it's not through a company, not through some kit or something, then that's actually a good return. It's definitely higher than anything you'd get in Europe and so on. The only thing you also need to understand for yourself, I think, is that when you invest in Bali, the entry point isn't that important. And here I could really argue with you because
We can debate this point because let me finish my thought. Okay. What I mean is that even in our financial models, which we work through very rigorously from a risk management perspective, we have a pessimistic forecast of a pessimistic scenario. We have a double reduction of all indicators. We don't have a 50-year forecast, although even if there's a long sheet for 30 years, formally it's set for 20 years, but that's just to give you a reference point, because when you sell your property, as your agent, I will explain this to the new buyer. Because the new buyer, after 5 years, will already be calculating their own profitability. So the first investor made money, and then the second one. I have to show them the future, but not a single one of our investors has ever, when we were creating a personal investment declaration for their portfolio, not one has ever said, "Oh, I'll be holding this for 20 years." Everyone understands perfectly well that people's planning horizon, especially for Ukrainians, is 5 to 7 years, while for Europeans it's 10 to 15. Not a single European has ever told us about a 30-year horizon. Everyone said, well, 10 to 15 years, but I'll be watching the market along the way. Because if there's strong growth, let's say there's stagnation now, I think the market will stagnate for the next 3 to 5 years, and then there will be growth again. If there's a crisis, it will drop and then recover. Well, some time will pass, and things will keep moving forward anyway. Growth. If you see growth, and at that moment you're offered 1.5 times your initial investment, you realize that over 2 or 3 years, you've earned rental income and you didn't even want to sell. But when you add up the numbers, one of the previous projects we entered with the developer, we actually went in as financial partners ourselves and bought units for ourselves. I wanted to keep an apartment for myself. It's in the center of Canggu with views of rice fields, a gorgeous place with panoramic views of the volcanoes. All in all, a really great unit. I wanted to keep it for myself. But then at some point, someone came to me and offered such a sum when I bought it for 100 and they offered me 150. I turned it down. No, I invested all the money at $85. That's fine with me. I didn't agree to 150. But then it goes up to $157. And I'm like, okay, fine. I guess that's just how it is sometimes. Well, why? Because in the moment, if I hadn't been offered, I simply wouldn't have sold, just like any investor. But for him, it's important not only to jump in when everything is soaring. You fend off offers just like I did. Yeah, I eventually agreed. We were offered a lot, a significant amount in the deal. It's also important when the market is just functioning normally, but I want to exit. The second question is about large infrastructure complexes. Why are we so cautious about them, including, for example, the park? Because the park is run by our friends. We've worked with them on some complexes, and they're really awesome guys. But why are huge infrastructure complexes a risk for investors? Because when you build a lot of units, you create internal competition. And if tomorrow 20 out of your 100 investors want to sell, each of them will go to the market. And you still haven't sold all your units. So he's competing with you as the developer, and they're also competing with each other. The market price from the developer has gone up to 150,000. I think, okay, 145. Well, then there's a neighbor nearby who's also selling, and he thinks, fine, 143. And that's when the price dumping starts. As a developer, I would never believe that you'd say you'd sell your own unit. You won't sell it, but instead you'll be selling your investor's unit if they suddenly want to exit before construction is finished. That's a conflict of interest. I don't know about you, I'm just voicing what we've encountered in the market. Investors really have a huge problem when they start competing with the developer from the inside and with other investors. How do you handle this? Do you forbid people from reselling? Let me explain. How is it with you? According to the
Contract, you can exit 6 months after, more precisely, after you've paid 50%.
after 6 months?
No, after you've paid 50%. On average, that's about 6 to 9 months from the start of construction. Something like that. You can exit on your own or you can exit with someone else. But honestly, we've only had 1 or 2 exits.
Because people didn't want to? No, because
One person couldn't keep up with the payments. So we just gave him his money back with some kind of penalty. The second one was because we were delayed by a few months. He said he saw things differently, but his unit was immediately bought by another investor because he had gotten in at the pre-sale stage.
your investor?
No, just someone from the street. Another investor. If he had wanted to sell it himself, he would have made a profit. But since he just wanted to exit, we gave him his money back. He paid 60 to 70%.
You gave him his money back?
We gave him his money back and that unit was sold immediately. And it happened in almost a week's time. Canggu. To be honest about your model, first of all, I think not everything is about price at all. And in general, the strategy within Anta Group is not about undercutting prices. That's why we're actually quite conservative when it comes to commissions, relatively speaking. Yes, we do follow some general standards, but we don't undercut on commissions or for agents and so on. At least we try not to do that. Additional bonuses. The chessboard, increasing the step system, all of that is in place, but without any aggressive undercutting because I don't believe that's the main tool for making a sale. I believe that truly good high-quality properties, including those with good infrastructure, are the kind that when you open booking and look at where you'll be staying, whether it's the Radisson or, I don't know, something like Uluta style, you'll probably look at the Radisson first because it's familiar to you.
I'd say those are two different types of tourists. Why?
Maybe the difference is about $30 to $50 per room, give or take. And
I'll explain why. We've studied this topic very thoroughly. How does it work? There are two fundamentally different classes of tourists. I classify them conditionally. One group fundamentally only stays in hotels. Why? Safety, maybe kids, concierge service, cleaning. Although in Bali, villas are cleaned as well, but it's a completely different thing. You call, and this type of person only chooses hotels on principle. The second class of tourist, for the same money, always chooses to travel. He understands, my budget for 2 weeks. The second type of tourist, for the same money, will get a bigger apartment, a bigger villa, something more. Why? Because he wants to squeeze out as much as possible for the same money to make it more efficient, so to speak. When I go on vacation, not to work, but to really relax, I'm the second type. Yes, so I understand that of course you can do things with helpers there, but the point is, if you can get a better vacation for the same money, then these are two completely different classes of tourists.
yes, but we're talking about who earns more.
Right? Let me get back to my thought and finish it. And your model is focused specifically on that audience, those who go to hotels. Of course, and that's great. For,
Organized or independent tourists who choose a higher level of vacation.
well, I mean,
It's,
the hotel vacation, yes. Yes.
first of all, because this category is less affected by all sorts of economic crises and problems. You know, during COVID, where did everyone stay?
Where? In
Hotels? In,
hotels?
of course,
You mean in Bali?
in Bali. Everyone stayed in hotels. Why? The price was cheaper. Apartments dropped completely. People lived almost for free, just paying for electricity.
Apartments dropped.
Villas too. People were almost just paying for electricity. Because no one wanted to take care of things themselves. You weren't allowed to go clean, to do the cleaning yourself. And this girl in Bali doesn't want to do it either. And what? Cook for yourself? And hotels? They lowered the price by 20 to 30%. They sold everything by the month, not by the day. They were completely filled up. People lived for months in great hotels in Nusa Dua. They lived in hotels for half a year. They were spending $100 a day. 5-star hotel service. At the same time, you know what the hotel's occupancy was? It was 100% for some of them. And RI was about 50%. Well, excuse me. Well, relatively speaking, return on investment. About half of the projected amount, roughly. Well, percent.
That is 5.
It dropped, but not to zero. So accordingly, overall, you went through, this period pretty smoothly. You just kind of flatlined it. And if we talk about where we're aiming, we're targeting an audience that clearly has more money and who, even in the case of, as you say, this instability, can still afford to come. And they definitely won't be switching to economy class. They will stay in their business or premium segment, and we accordingly understand and see this. And to be frank, for example, at Pandawa, our room costs from 100 to 10,000. How many square meters? 32 or 33. Superior. At the same time, it's a management company, a well-known hotel brand. And yet our competitor sells a room for 80. It would seem 20% cheaper. Apartments or a hotel. But it's still a hotel.
Some kind of, yes.
88? Yes. It used to be even cheaper. It was 85 or 84. 88? First of all, the room size there is smaller. It's no longer business class. It's economy, and it doesn't matter if you're in a hotel or somewhere else. By the way, they themselves
Actually declared that it's not business class. Well,
that's right, because they have a 3-star brand. Their brand is 3 stars. Even though they position themselves as 4 stars, it's really 3. If we look at the classification and the name of this hotel, so if you look at the occupancy history, and I can send it to you, I definitely will. Maybe you can add it in. I'll send you the latest data for 2024 for Bali hotels from the Bali Hotel Association. So you'll see for yourself. The most popular segment in terms of occupancy is the 4 to 5 star hotels. The segment with the lowest occupancy is everything under $100 a night.
yeah, I totally agree. If you
Set a price like you guys buy it. My unit is under $100,000, less than $3,000 per square meter, or even $3,000, but because of that, it's small, some tiny unit. And at the same time, you promise the investor, like, look, the yield will be there. Our room won't cost 120 or 150, but 80. So let's get back to the end consumer. It's not the investor who's going to live in this room, but the tourist. The tourist goes on booking, opens up Pandawa, looks, there are a bunch of options, then checks out Ramada, and then some X and Y. Some local brand or some name that nobody knows, for example, 100% with 8. And he sees that the price for Ramada or say Radisson is $120. Then it goes, for example, $100.80. For someone who came to Bali for a week or two, it's super important to spend that time well. He looks at 1.5 hectares of land.
infrastructure,
Accessibility, great reviews, their own big gym, this and that, a hotel operator, and so on. What do you think? Is he going to save $140 over 7 nights? That's $20 a night, if I did the math right, yeah? Will he save the $140, or will he choose the option he can really trust?
let me explain. I'll answer that question for you. There are 2 different types of tourists. There will be those who would never in their life consider hotels like yours.
Well, for $80, excuse me.
I'm not talking about 60. Why 60?
All right, fine, for $80, but excuse me, that tourist who pays $80 won't add any value to my complex as a whole. And
What kind of value are you talking about? Will someone paying $110 add value?
because, on average, a person who spends more than $100 a day on accommodation generally spends about $100 on staying in this hotel complex.
You mean massages?
Everything, food, messages, restaurants, and so on. And that's important to me too, because I'm an investor just like you.
It's great for you, for my investor.
But here too, it's important what the end investor is aiming for. If the end investor thinks that buying for less, they'll earn more. That's a big misconception.
And here the question isn't about a lower price or a lower price per square meter. There are a number of factors here. Yes, we've discussed a lot of them today, right? So if we sum it up, there are 2 major blocks, security and ROI. When it comes to profitability, security means the land, the quality of the documents, and reliability. Do you have any cases like that? There was a case where a developer came during the stagnation while there was the war and coronavirus, did something, then flew off somewhere else, went to the States, and now something is being built there, so to speak. And the investor who bought from the developer is dependent, whether the developer maintains a presence in that market, whether they provide support, whether they exercise control. Of course, there are management companies, but still, Lisa, you're the one who has to renew it anyway. So, if you're not running off anywhere, if you're here in the market, then you're here buying construction equipment.
You're putting down roots.
That's a factor of investment security. There's also the ROI factor, profitability.
Look, let me ask you a question. So when you're checking, how do you take into account the factor that, for example, this unit in this hotel will deliver the ROI the developer claims, but this one won't? And
I'll answer you. We actually, your financial models too, if we finished our project there, we didn't look at them. Well, I personally didn't look. But if we're going to work, then we'll finish the review. We hope to.
wrap it up, yes, you'll give some feedback.
Yes, we're right in the process now. But we have never, not once in our lives, used developers' financial models as a basis. I mean, yes, we'll look at them and then close them. We build all the financial models ourselves. As you know, we have software that parses the entire market. And now we have more than a year and a half of data. I already have seasonality, I already have dips and slumps. I have the whole market at my fingertips, I can see it all. This isn't Airbnb in Bali, in our segment, in the hotel business. Booking is the main source. Airbnb is also a source, but to a lesser extent. We are the only service that knows this data. No one else in Bali has booking data. Accordingly, I build the financial models myself. My team builds them based on risk management and so on. So the first block is security. We discussed it, set it aside, that's clear. The question is ROI. It consists of many factors, the ones we've discussed. These include construction timelines and delays. For example, there is one major company in the world. Their project launches take a very long time. That is, in terms of quality and everything else, they're great. But they have one big problem. Well, there are several, but one of the key ones. It's that their project launches take a long time. They have a lot of costs at launch of the property. And all of this is paid for from investor and working capital funds. There was a case, this is a real case, shared with me by very trustworthy people, so it's unlikely they lied to me. The investor received 3% in the first year, just 3. But then, once it gets going, it goes very far, for a long time, and has huge liquidity because of the brand. But the construction timelines, delays, and launch periods, all of that affects ROI. Because if you go into something smaller, for example, the ideal project, for us right now that's 2,500 square meters of land, 70 unit rooms, 400 to 500 square meters, and infrastructure. And parking, all of that isn't counted. This is the ideal project. Why? It's quick enough to build, it's standardized, it's straightforward. It's not a small complex like you said about the apartments, I completely agree. This is already bigger. A hotel. This is already a hotel operator, meaning it gets built quickly, launched quickly, and you won't run into any particular difficulties. You're not digging 2 floors down there. Guys, you did it, and that's impressive, but it's an extremely difficult task. As an agent, when I came to your site in Canggu, I had no idea what you'd achieve in a year. I just look at the project documentation, I look at the ambitions, at the challenges, and I understand that for me, okay, you did a great job, but for me it's still a risk factor. And I have to weigh that. From the perspective of ROI, overall profitability, there are a number of factors. We've discussed them, but the most crucial one is the management company. Because who is responsible for the safety of the money, the investments? The developer. They are responsible for all these things. But only one company is responsible for profitability. That's the management company. It all depends on how they hand over the property.
And fill it. Look, let me tell you, you're talking about a typical project that you choose. What you described is the standard story for most developers who build on Pandawa or Malasti, somewhere in that region. Do you realize that when all these projects open, they'll all be the same?
No, wait a second. The question of the concept, of course, is one of the most important.
The issue is that there's 400 square meters of infrastructure, no parking, and no designated areas.
Not a lack, everything is present.
Well, okay, the presence of some kind of surface parking and a bit of infrastructure and just overall crampedness. Like this in a dense area where there's actually a lot of open space, where in principle this kind of crampedness isn't welcomed. In Pandawa in general, if we're talking about Phuket, people choose this area to be able to breathe. That's why, my development density is 50 on 1.5 hectares, not 150 like in the example you gave, where on 25 airs they crammed in a block for about 70 units. So when the end consumer, not the investor, chooses between this or another product, I think they will definitely, well, let's say if we look at it this way, if we compare it to what's happening outside the paint market, in any other market, a glass building rents out much better. Something powerful, striking, and new compared to the typical Khrushchevkas that are located right across from this glass building.
But these developers I'm talking about, they don't have Khrushchevkas, they have just as great...
A clubhouse, let's call it that, on a smaller scale.
No, that's a hotel. We're not talking about a clubhouse here.
A hotel? Yes. But still, I think it's a different level. You're comparing a 3-star hotel to a 4-star hotel
Why do you assume it's 3 stars?
because 24 square meters is the standard size for a hotel room. No, not 24. I am now.
I'm talking about a 39 square meter project.
39 square meters. What brand?
Nexa.
Great, but it's not a hotel brand.
This is the developer.
Not at all.
1 second, this is the morning developer and he is building the managers. You're not a novel either. The management company will be a hotel operator
Which one?
in this project. We're still choosing.
Look,
There will be an international hotel operator.
so that
Doesn't like it and isn't the only cool guy in this village.
already, yes, but I'm the first.
But now here, if one of the first, even before Arif Mira, they were at
They don't have any brand and not their own file. How's that? So who do they have?
Sikana,
ASIC, that's actually an Asian brand they came up with themselves.
okay? But that's, fine
It's not international, right?
on paper to manage. Like,
Ukroika is not a raider with their
no, but I don't have the strength. Oksa, wait, these are the guys
right over here.
and they do it really beautifully.
Small apartments, about 15 to 20 units. Don't set fire, partner. They have this house. Well, there's a house or something, but there is
The very small one.
wonderful. Excuse me. We're not saying they're bad. We're just comparing right now. I always try, when you have something, you should always compare your conditionally acquired opportunity. You can buy any apartment. It might be a good size. Maybe it will rent out well. But the question is what kind of return you'll get from it and so on.
Then,
There's also the question of exit. It's great if you have Oxa, but I know that now, in principle, a lot of people are building like Oxa does. For example, for Shaibi's son, many developers are making exactly the same kind of standard development, basically townhouses with.
and here's another thing. So what's the secret to Oksa's success? It's not about these townhouses, but about their sales model. When they launch sales, not for this current complex, but the previous one, they sold out in a day.
So, how many units are there?
Well, if they're turning over 20 million, that's not normal.
How many units was that?
I don't remember. No. Well, that's good. That's really something.
You know,
They have villas going for 500,000 each.
that's mainly because the developer already has a fully completed and finished project, one that has a track record of proven profitability and demonstrated financial success.
Austrians, 9 years on the market.
Yes, so based on that, it's a bit easier for them to sell than it is for us, for example.
I agree, 100%.
And if I were to make predictions about the future of the companies and the market, I believe that the successful companies will be those whose projects, once launched, have proven themselves, or maybe even, like you said, I thought you guys wouldn't even get past the parking lot, but then I come by and you already have 4 floors built. It's like you believed in us a little more than before. That's exactly the effect we want. To have you walk into our complex and say, not bad. And then,
Get the financial report.
exactly right. And then, for example, a year later, you get the financial report and see that it's not just the first but the second forecast. And again, we haven't discussed this yet, but I'll tell you, I don't focus on the occupancy tools that all my competitors rely on.
That's a really good point.
I believe that a quality, good product, a hotel product should fulfill 2 main functions. That's business and leisure. It's about socializing and relaxation, as well as the experiences that are closely connected to business trips. For that, you need infrastructure. From something as simple as a tour bus arriving or large vehicles of some kind,
Bus drives to our parking lot.
right up to our parking lot, but not a big Icarus bus, because we have 4.5 meters there. But those, Balinese and Indonesian buses for 25 people, those ones, they're medium sized. Yeah. Plus, we have a connection with Batu Balon. We have our own road. We don't go through Taratai.
Yeah, I know.
You get it, right? Yes, of course, I know. That's important too. We didn't build anything there. There will be a full-fledged 4-meter road with a reversible lane. Yeah. On the other side, so you can drive in without any problems, without having to wait somewhere. Go visit Leka. Let's put it this way. In one of his complexes, even a bus can't get through there somewhere.
Not articles. You're bringing up something else. That's good. Well done.
I'm just telling you that she has a different strategy. But let's say there's a non-conference there. We might not hold it in the complex that's next to us, but I don't know if he has that kind of infrastructure there. The second point is similar. A large conference hall with 300 seats or more than 500 capacity, the ability to host all kinds of conferences. Where are all the events in Chengdu happening now? Hubble and somewhere else, nowhere. Or Nuanu has taken them all now. It feels like, they're joking. There's a joke that Nuanu closed Parkview so that all the events would be at his place.
That's why he bought Dolce now.
Or he bought Parkview. I guess that's more accurate to say. Well, I don't know. Anyway, that's just Bali gossip. That's not the point. The point is that Nuanu used to be Ubud Parkview, and there's nothing in Canggu.
More like basically all the hotels are actually located in Bukit.
Yeah, in Canggu, they're opening Anta Canggu with a complex with big air conditioning and everything. That's a booster spot. I have quite a lot of experience in the tourism industry, and I understand that we're going to get busy. Through international hotel operators, through international tour operators, through travel companies, by attending exhibitions like the World Travel Market. There's ITB, Berlin, and so on. These are professional exhibitions where a product called a hotel finds buyers who sell tours. For example, like Turkey, Egypt, the Maldives, and so on do. Accordingly, these are our models.
Will Ribos be doing this, or will you? This
will be handled by Ribos, but we will have an internal tour operator who will interact with external tour operators who will be forming the packages. For example, why would you be in Oman? I'm personally into surfing. The schedule there will be so top-notch. What will I have? 4 surfing trips just from Ukraine, with 25 to 30 people each per year. I'll have groups coming from other countries too, you see? So it's a hotel for event tourism, where something is happening every day, where you have groups arriving. And for a group to come to you, what do you need besides infrastructure? What else?
social scene, well, of course. And
What else? I don't
know what?
The most important thing is the number of rooms and their size. And right here, bam, bam, 2 competitors are lying there and, excuse me, bleeding out. Okay. This is very important because if a bus arrives at your place, if the Chinese want to, how many rooms do you need?
To rent. They don't travel in.
I mean, they don't travel.
There are many.
Anna, stop by Holiday Resort and you'll be amazed. You'll go into a coma. Your mind will hang there for a minute. So we don't have a hotel in Tenge. We have one in Kitan.
Taps.
Like in a hotel in Canggu, there are about 5 of them. Citadenis.
I agree, this is not your K and
Not my competitor. Citadine is Homo Uma.
Coma.
Maybe yes. Here is Sakana, opposite Citadenis. Well, listen, they have a great workload.
73%.
Well, that's a great occupancy rate. Considering they're located on Barava, well, look.
1 second. Probably not comparable, because after all, they have lofts, not rooms. They have 2-story, 2-level, 80 square meter lofts, but they also cost $280.
Well, excuse me, but yeah.
And everything is on the first line.
Not the first line.
No, their access to the ocean is through the villas. Well, okay, that doesn't count. The first ones.
Anyway, you still have to go through Nistom if you use the main entrance. Those are the ones opposite the Citadines, right?
Yes.
Miraka. Last year it was Miraka Sikana. Yes, that's right. They're more or less okay. Well, A4 plus Hulidin plus Komoma and the new one. That Interconte just opened for 13 million a night. Yes.
No, well, you also took something else. It's less there, and it's cheaper there.
Well, I don't know. When I was there, it was either 9 or 13. Well, either way, it's over $500 there. It's expensive, and we have it for 120, 100, sometimes 120, 130, up to 150 if things don't work out for you. Fintislova is selling for 150 per unit now, not the whole unity. So, excuse me, the investor who's about to come in and buy now,
Well, that's the final price.
but his yield will be just under 10% per year, roughly.
So, 130, you need to rent it out?
Well, look, I think if everything goes well, we'll even be renting it out for 150. The question is, what kind of financial model are we drawing up? I want you, after running your calculations, to say that we're close to the truth, not just floating somewhere up in the clouds. So, based on this and everything else, I'm building all this infrastructure and creating a complex product. Not to show off, but so that at the final stage, to show my investors that, look, we've done more than anyone else, so that not only those who use Airbnb and Booking come to us, but also those whose trips are arranged by some tour operator who just arrives with a group and a suitcase, maybe for a surf trip or something else, only at that level. Okay?
Sounds pretty good.
Well, that's basically what we're doing all this for. Accordingly, of course, it costs more money and it takes more time. So, excuse me, what kind of product do you want to end up with? And a thoughtful investor. They should understand that, in principle, these are strong positions for investing in this property.
Super. On this positive note, we've discussed a lot. Yes, I think it's going to be great. Very cool. I actually really like it. Let's continue over dinner.
All right, it's a deal. Thank you.
Friends, as always, an interesting conversation with Anton. We've started our communication and talked many times. And very often our conversation turns into, if not an argument, then at least a good discussion.
Absolutely right.
Everyone has their own opinion, their own position, and that's very interesting. And communicating with top experts in the market is something else. Anta Group and Anton Taranenko definitely inspire a very strong sense of trust and a truly great deal of respect in everyone who knows them. And we continue on, as we are now wrapping up our alignment process. I think that we will be able to give our final summary and conclusions very soon.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time, for inviting and digging not just on the surface, but also going deep, and for chasing not just percentages, but also clarity. That's very important in projects, and I value that in the brokerage market and in the team. Be sure to subscribe. Good, quality content is very important. Please support us with a like and a subscription.
Subscribe to Anton Taranenko on Instagram. Are you interested in real estate investments in Bali? Contact my company, True Real Estate, especially if you're looking for very safe and profitable projects. We are very strict in our selection process and conduct thorough checks before taking on a property for sale. Sometimes this takes quite a few months, but the result is well worth those uncomfortable moments.